Money, one of the Way to Wow shows. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we are here every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And we are here to talk about all things related to careers and business and finances, especially wealth building, looking at the financial side of things. And before I introduce my guest, who I'm very, very excited to talk to. I'll tell a little story about how we met in a minute. I just want to remind you that we are here indeed every week. This is our third show each week. We kind of wrap up with people making money, and on Mondays we have our show. Trusts and Estates Weekly, which is a somewhat narrow topic for those of you who are dealing with those issues and or want to help people deal with them. And on Tuesdays is Business Lessons from the Military. And I just want to mention that next Tuesday, I have a special guest, my good friend, Mark Brooker, retired captain, United States Navy, who is an expert in leadership. And he's going to talk to us about how leadership principles from the military can be used in your business, in your professional life. So without further ado, several weeks ago, my daughter and I were sitting in a restaurant, and we were having our regular sort of weekly daddy-daughter date. And I noticed a table of people kind of across the aisle having a grand time. And the waitress, I believe it was, brought over a couple of bottles of wine from my friend Jeff Morgan's winery, Covenant, who Jeff was on the show. Actually, he kicked off the reboot of the show now about a year and a half ago, I think it was. And so I couldn't resist. I went over, and my guest Brian was sitting there, and I said, pardon me, I don't mean to disturb you, but I just had to say thank you very much for ordering my friend's wine. He's like, your friend? Who's your friend? And I'm waxing rhapsodic about Jeff Morgan and his wife Jody, and going on and on and on. And meanwhile, Brian brings up his phone, and there's a picture of him with Jeff together. He's actually known Jeff for longer than I have. And it turns out that Brian is in the wine business, and my saying, the worst day working in wine is pretty much better than the best day working in anything else. So and then in turn, Brian came to my table and sat down and was talking with my daughter and talking with us. We hit it off right from the beginning. And I said, I have to have you come on the show and talk about what it is to work in the wine business. Brian does not make wine like Jeff. He is a wine distributor, and it's Terra, right? Is the name of your company?
It's Dalla Terra, and the devil. I'm sorry, it's in the details, because with Direttore you're not going to find the website, but with Dalla Terra, you will. So
okay.
Dalla Terra. It means right. Of the earth.
Of the earth. Okay. So, and I will, I'll post a link to your website in the show notes after the episode posts on our YouTube channel. But my Italian is, no bueno. We're gonna say French, Spanish I can do, a little Hebrew, but Italian no. So welcome, Brian Larky, to People Making Money. Thank you so much for joining me, joining our viewers, and coming on talking about your career. So as I always do with our guests, I ask them to start as far back in their professional life as they're willing to go. And the kickoff question usually is, what you're doing now, is that what you always wanted to do when you were a kid? Or, has this been, in essence, like a detour from, I don't know, dreams of being an astronaut? How, what was that like, if you're willing to share that with us?
Was it my original dream and vision to be in the wine business? No. I didn't know there was a wine business because we didn't have a lot of wine in our house. We had a little bit of Manischewitz for Shabbat, for blessings. We didn't drink a lot of wine, but we had a couple of friends that were into wine. And so slowly over the years, they were dear friends, very close family friends, and they started a winery in the Napa Valley called Whitehall Lane that they later sold. And it's still there, and it's doing a great job with the current family that owns it. And but they got that off the ground. They built it. Two brothers and their families came together, and that's what kind of put the idea. Oh, wine comes from somewhere. And I ended up not going to the East Coast. My dad had some ideas about that, and I ended up going to school on the West Coast. And I went to UC Davis. Love UC Davis, and believe strongly in UC Davis and what it offers. And at Davis, I found out that that is the, argumentatively one of the number one wine universities in the world. And yes, there are more than one. And I got fascinated with it. And that's what really drew me in, were friends and family that already had an existing winery that was a real thing. And these are friends and family that I believed in, that I admired. They didn't like fall through the cracks and end up growing some grapes in some dirt somewhere. These guys were fascinating. They were highly educated. The brothers and the families were like cousins to me, and we still are. And one of their son's daughters getting her bat mitzvah is this coming Saturday. So, these things are still ongoing. And but that's what really opened my eyes to it being a possibility. A lot of times all we need when we're young is to know that it's A, possible, and B, someone saying that you can do this too. And a lot of people have no idea about what's out there. You mentioned you want to be an astronaut. People see more about astronauts than they do about a lot of other things. And other things, not that astronaut isn't plausible, but it's pretty select. I mean, there's only a handful of astronauts, but there's so many other wonderful careers and ways to work in the world that we never know about, because we're I'm not going to say myopic, but we're limited in what we're able to expose ourselves to, especially as young people. So having folks that tell us, hey, this is a possibility, those are really important things. And I fly planes, and I share the opportunity for people to fly in the plane, especially young people. And I tell them, do you want to try and fly the plane? Do you want to understand what's going on? And I let them know that this is a possibility for you. You can go ahead and do this. And a plane doesn't have to cost more than a car. And a lot of people have cars. So it's just about opening up people's eyes. So my eyes were opened up. And I spent time in the Napa Valley. I looked at the wine industry, and I was at an amazing school. And so I took advantage of that and began studying enology, which is basically winemaking and some viticulture, some grape growing, because they go hand in hand. But what I really loved about it, as at this point I'm 19 years old, 20 years old, and what I really loved about it was this interaction of human beings and Mother Earth. And I was working in laboratories. I was doing some work for some research for a company called Plant Genetics. It was acquired by Genentech, but it was high tech research. And I really loved that too. And I was working in a lab, and there's a lot of don't touch that, don't eat that, keep that out of your mouth, wear goggles. And with winemaking, you could really get in and touch it and play with it and taste it. In fact, that was the whole idea. And at the same time, there's a lot of chemistry involved, and there's a lot of science, just overall science. And so I love that aspect. And I love the way that we as human beings have been working with Mother Nature in agriculture for years and years, and in winemaking. And you can go back to some of the oldest wineries at the time, which were Israel and that part of the world. They go back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And so this is not a new idea that humans have had. They've been walking down this road for quite some time. And as the Italians would say, c'è un perché. That means there's a why, there's a reason why we've been doing this for so long, and why it's been integrated into many religions, obviously in Judaism and Catholicism and religion after religion, maybe not so much Mormonism, but Many religions have adopted it. Many cultures have adopted it as being an integral part of the culture of the civilization. And once something, anything is adopted, look how handsome you are today. No, it's not a digression, but you've got your beautiful stylish vest on, and clothing is something that human beings have been wearing since Adam and Eve, I would imagine. And we have expanded on clothing. We've created fashion, we've created style, and you can look at someone and see where they're from by how they carry themselves, how they dress, in addition to obviously what they look like. But wine is no different. It's something that's been integral to many, many cultures. And it may not be made out of, they're fermented products. In this case, we were fermenting grapes, but there are many other things that we can ferment and create a pleasing beverage from. And so I got fascinated with the development, with the evolution of wine. And then from there, it goes on to kind of the engineering of how is this done and how do you create a winery, and the coursework that went on there, and heating and cooling and thermodynamics and understanding those aspects. And then from there, for me, it shifted all the way over to what we would call today, but not then in the 1980s, social media and influencing others and brand building. And why is this wine better than that wine? Not really. It's different, but it sells for 3 times as much. Why is that? How do we get people to shift and drink and try? And what are the objectives? So then it got into kind of a marketing and more of a business idea. And wine for me is one of the few businesses where one must integrate an understanding of the natural environment and an understanding of the cultural environment to make a go of it. And you throw in a dash of science and a lot of engineering, and you have the wine industry. And so I started at UC Davis, and I did a lot of worked a number of harvests, took time off of college to go work harvests in the Napa Valley. And I worked at Farniente Winery, I worked at Domaine Chandon Winery, I worked at some wineries that were focusing at the time in Chardonnay and Cabernet, others were doing sparkling wine, and it gave me a very well-rounded experience, and it gave me an opportunity to kind of dive into that.
So what does it mean when you say you worked the harvest? I think I know what you mean, but for people who maybe aren't particularly familiar with the wine business, what does that mean, you work the harvest? Oops. I lost your sound.
How about that?
There you go.
Is that better?
That's better, huh?
So in the wine industry, you got to make the stuff, and you can't just open a bag and dump it in like you can do for beer making. For beer, you add ingredients, and for winemaking, you add grapes. So grapes are harvested once a year, and so we have to go out and harvest the grapes. So you get on your tractors and you run out and you collect all the fruit. And that can take weeks and weeks. And at times you're harvesting, if you're picking whites and reds, they mature at different times. And so you might be out there for 4, 5, 6 weeks as this vineyard comes. And this is a higher, cooler vineyard. This is a lower, warmer vineyard. These are whites. These are reds. They're going to hang longer. So it can take a long time, depending on what the winery makes. You make one wine, you go and you pick that vineyard and you're done. But it's hard to survive on something usually that small. So many wineries have a diverse portfolio of vineyards and wineries and locations and things like that. And so we go out and we pick the grapes. And once those grapes are picked, they need to be crushed immediately. We're trying to avoid something called oxidation. And we all know about that, or we've heard about that. We know it's bad in our bodies. We have things that we look for called antioxidants. They're supposed to be good. And we use something that performs some of those duties in the winemaking as well. And so basically we got to go out and pick the grapes and ferment them. And that's the harvest. And it's not one day. It can go on for a long time. And white grapes are treated differently from red grapes in terms of the harvest basically is a time of long hours, long days, hard work. You're getting up and it's dark and you're dealing with fruit as it's coming in, and you're pressing grapes off well into the night as batches of grapes are going to the presses, and then you're taking the fruit, taking the juice, and transferring that with pumps into big tanks, and then you're treating it and you're racking it, and maybe you're inoculating it, maybe you're not inoculating, but it's the beginning of a long process that really doesn't end. It's a lot of physical work. You're dealing with heavy things and big machines often, and it can also be a lot of fun. You're sticky and you're wearing a pair of shorts and you're trying to avoid bumblebees, and you're hanging out with your buddies, and it can be fun as well. So it's a bit of a celebration. It's kind of the end of the year, and a lot of cultures again have harvest celebrations, and this is what's happening at that time in the winery.
Yeah, so I remember watching a documentary about champagne making, and they during the harvest time they would get young people coming from really all over the country to Champagne in France, and they would be, like you said, they were up before it was light, and it's labor with the bringing the crates and the grapes and all that, and then in midday they would have these big meals with bread and water and cheese, and then they're back into the fields. It had quite almost like a romantic aspect to it, even though it was obviously a lot of hard work, but there was camaraderie, a lot of kind of joking with the people, and then doing the crushes and all that. It's one of the things that I'm getting from what you said so far is, and I don't know, you strike me as being a polymath in that you're on the one hand you're into sort of sociology, anthropology, history, science, including chemistry and even physics, plus business. It seems like winemaking is, or the wine business, I should say, attracts you because you can be involved in so many different things, as opposed to necessarily focusing on one aspect. You can work outdoors, you can work indoors. There seems to be a multifaceted aspect to it. Does that strike you as what one of the things that attracted you to the business, or am I off base here?
I think that depending on the business, it's always good to have an understanding 360 degrees of what you're dealing with, what you're getting involved in. And in this case, it's a little more, there are a lot of pieces to it. You always have a production issue, whether you're making silicone chips or software or whatever. But here you're dealing with Mother Nature, in addition to dealing with humans and distribution and the laws and financing and all those kind of things. And I've been told that perhaps I have a short attention span. Perhaps, excuse me, there's a shiny object over here. I'll be right back. Yeah. And I do kind of get interested in a number of different things, and so this affords me that opportunity to dive into different issues and different pools. Some are politics. There's a lot of politics in this stuff. Do I think there should be? No, I don't think there should be politics in someone's culture and the food and wine. And I kind of see those as the same thing, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. But there is a lot of diversity in terms of what we're doing. There's not a lot of diversity in the United States in terms of culture, in terms of racial diversity. We're seeing a lot of white men doing this business. And that's, I think that's where it started from. But at the same time, more and more and more people are coming in from different cultures, different races, more and more women. I work exclusively in Italy, and we have so many of our producers that we represent in the United States are women, and businesses, and the entire company is driven by women, run by women. And that's no longer a thing. It's no longer a thing in a place like Italy. It certainly isn't an issue here in the United States. Right. So it's a very open and welcoming business for that much to say. And I think that you're really judged. There's a meritocracy. You're judged on the quality of what you're putting out. Mm-hmm. And you can have quality at $9.99. You can have quality at $200 a bottle. It just depends on what you're considering quality. And I guess one is absolute quality, and the other would be considered value. Mm-hmm. But people can choose within that paradigm where they want to work. And it's not all romance and Lucille Ball stomping on the grapes and all that stuff. And I love Lucy. It's not, and a lot of the hard labor is immigrant labor that comes in because it's periodic work. And whether people are, harvesting strawberries or harvesting grapes, there are crews that come in, and that's true around the world. Very few nations that are wealthy enough to buy and drink wine are doing a lot of their own labor when it comes to agriculture. Mm-hmm. So that's true for Italy, where we work primarily. It's true here for the United States. We rely heavily on immigrant labor for agriculture in general, and winemaking, or grape growing, I should say, is no different. It's and it's getting better and better, I think, for the crews that are out there, because we have better and better labor laws that are out there. But it's a lot of work, and there's not a lot of play involved, because it's a timeline and the clock starts ticking, and once that clock starts going, the grapes it's kind of like a bell-shaped curve. It goes up in terms of maturity and ripeness, and then at that peak moment when we think, okay, we got to harvest this vineyard, and then it starts descending. Maybe it's raining that day. Maybe we have to wait. Maybe we have too many acres and we can't get it all done in a couple of days. And by now it's 3, 4, 5 days later, and we're still hustling. And so it's a matter of moving crews around and taking care of equipment and making sure we have tractors and things allocated and the crew's ready to go at this location. And maybe that vineyard was hit by hail in the spring, and so we have to treat it differently. There's a lot that goes into the harvest reserves, that goes into the winemaking aspect. And I did get a good opportunity after when I moved. So I finished up at Davis, mm-hmm. and then I moved to Italy, and I took an opportunity to go live and work in Italy after having worked in the Napa Valley. So I had that experience, and I went to go work with a guy named Maurizio Zanella, and he had founded a winery. That's still an amazing winery called Ca del Bosco. And that was in 1985 that I went out to Ca del Bosco. I went to go work a harvest. Mm-hmm. And it was an incredible experience. And I got to work with a man named Monsieur André Dubois. And Dubois was the chef du cave at Dom Perignon. His father was the chef du cave at Dom Perignon. And he had retired from DP and had taken an opportunity to come work with a fledgling young winery in Italy called Ca del Bosco. And I got there a few years after he was there, and I got to see a master at work. And this is primarily a sparkling wine making facility. They also made reds and whites, but it was really became known for Franciacorta, for the sparkling wine that was made in a méthode champenoise. And so I got to work directly with him, and they were looking for that integration of champagne and what was coming up in the world was Napa Valley. And what was Napa doing? And what were they learning? And who is this young guy that just gotten out of university? Did he have any new ideas or experiences? And it was an amazing opportunity to really work with a true master. And anytime you're working a trade and you're a tradesman, whether you're, a welder or you're a winemaker, it's so important to be able to work with a master and see their style. My internship, let's say, was all in French while I was working in Italy. And the guys in the cellar were speaking dialect. So I tried to glean as much as I could, but after a few months there, I became a little more comfortable and really began to learn. And after a year there, Mr. Zanella said, Mr. Dubois is going back to France. He's retiring. And would you be interested in staying on and taking over the responsibilities of production here? And I said to him, and this is my moniker when you're talking about wealth and you're talking about money and finance and all these kind of things. My motto is, it's always better to be lucky than smart. And I happened to be in the right place. I was there. I was seated with the owner founder, and he gave me an opportunity. So I took that opportunity. And my wife Audrey has a saying where she would say, her saying was always, say yes. Say yes. 2 simple words. You get an opportunity, say yes. You can always get up and leave, but why would you decline that in the beginning? So I stayed on. I stayed there for, 4.5 years, or it was almost, I don't remember how many years, 4.5 years, basically from 85 to 90. And then I came back to the US. And by then was Italian. I was loving Italy, and I felt like I was almost an ambassador for what was going on in Italy. And that was the renaissance of what Italy was doing in terms of winemaking. 85 was kind of when Italy started coming back on the map in the United States. And there was more investment in Italian wines. Remember back in the day when you had spaghetti and red and white tablecloths and a bottle of Chianti. And that's changed. And so now we have Italian restaurants and Italian food. La cucina italiana is really the most pervasive restaurant and food that we find right here in the United States. And we Americans are in love with Italy. We have Italian lighting. We have beautiful Italian glasses. We have Italian shoes. We have all this stuff that watches the fashion, the design. We love Italy. We just love Italy, from the food to the wine to everything else. And when you say you're going to Italy, nobody says, what? Why are you going there? They start telling you about their story and how much they love Italy, or how much they want to go and where they're going to go, because they've already thought and dreamed about it. And so it's one of those places, I think, that most people are just in love with. And in the very beginning, people have different opinions on France, but not the Italians. And they're just a wonderful, warm, welcoming community. And Italy is really a fabric of there's 20 political regions in there, meaning what you might call them states or something in this country, but they're completely different. Just as in this country, you might see a difference in ideology from one state to the other state, perhaps. In Italy, it's not just that, it's language. They speak completely different dialects. It's the foods, it's the wines they grow. They're all these tiny little countries that were unified, the unification of Italy, and it's still a tenuous group of individual city-states, you might call them, and you can see it on television all the time with who's screaming and yelling for which soccer team, right? It's all about the locals, and we love that. And there's so much passione, right? There's so much passion, whether it's the town you're from, the soccer team that you root for, or the type of food that you've come to know. The difference, I think, between growing up in California and studying at Davis, which is an hour from Napa Valley, and living and working in Napa. And today our offices for Dalla Terra, we're based in the Napa Valley. Been there for 30 years in Napa Valley. Napa's boring. Everyone hear me? Napa's boring. Napa has, 6 different varietals or whatever it is. And Italy has 600 varietals. Yeah. Italy is one of the most dynamic, expansive, it's a sandbox that we can really play in. And there are more grapes grown per region in Italy than the entire United States as a whole. Italy is the largest producer of wine by volume, more than France. Italy is the largest exporter. Italy is a force of nature when it comes to the wine business. And when you're dealing with volume and export, the quality it's not so great. Or it's used as a blending wine. You know who the largest importer of Italian wines are? I think it's France, quite honestly. And it's not because they're drinking a lot of Italian wine. It's because they're using a lot of it just in blending wines, just for bulk wine and things like that as well.
No idea.
So there's a lot of production going on. But what we focus on is high-end, high-quality grape growing and winemaking. And we work with a large range of grapes. And we work with a lot of things that people are familiar with, and we work with things that probably nobody has heard of. But there's enough of an interest here in the United States. It's driven by, for the most part, Italian restaurants to make this dream of being able to work in both countries a reality, because there's a demand, there's a curiosity, and there's kind of a baked-in customer base. Which are Americans, but they're kind of funneled through the vision of every wine list that you open up. I opened up that wine list a couple of weeks ago, and I saw Covenant Wines. I'm like, I know what I want. And but I was limited to whatever that restaurant chose to offer. And so every restaurant is a filter. And if we're bringing wines in from outside the United States, we have another filter that's the filter of the importer. And we have to convince these people to write checks and take our case of wine, put them on a boat because they're too heavy to fly by airplane. So they got to go on a ship. And we have to ship them all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to the United States, or all the way through the Panama Canal to the West Coast. There's a lot of transportation and costs that go into this. And we're still kind of experiencing the aftershocks right now of the supply chain, right? And all the issues that went on with that. And it's something that if you're a domestic producer of wine and you're in California, Oregon, or Washington, for the most part, that's where many of them are, not such a big deal because your stuff's already here in the US. Right. And then if you're suddenly threatened with tariffs and all kinds of things because of a political blow-up with another country and the current administration, well, there's some more stress that goes into, and these are things that you and your banker never imagined. And yet here we are. And so it's important to have a certain amount of, you need an extra, a little bit of fat on the bone, because a lot of times the conditions of what's happening shift things so severely that things get tough. Now that was balanced out by greater demand, because a lot of people were sitting at home like, I'm gonna have a glass of wine tonight. I'm gonna have two. I'm not driving. I'm gonna have three. And so that helped consumption in some ways. And at the same time, we were stymied because of the availability of containers and the ability to ship things, the availability of truckers to move things around. And we all saw that in the United States in what was happening across the board, as well as with the labor pool, right? I'm sure you've had people on, or you're going to have people on that are really going to dive into that. You know, you mentioned a captain friend of yours who is going to speak about leadership, and I'm sure you have other people that are speaking about different topics. But as a young entrepreneur, I am, tied to all these things. So it's been a really interesting journey over 33 years, from 1990. 33 years. And, I believe that we're still relevant. And I believe it because I lock myself in a dark closet. I repeat it over and over. Now, I believe we're still relevant because we still have a vibrant team, and because our sales continue to grow, and because we have solid relationships across the board. And a lot of that is due to our new team and the ability to grow and build a business within an industry. And my goal is to kind of work myself out of a job. My goal is to have a team that's built that doesn't need me. And I believe that if I'm doing a good job, I should be there about now. And I believe that we have an amazing team. And right now, I'm not that important to the day-to-day operations. I'm not important at all to the day-to-day operations, which is, that was my objective. Some people, they want to keep working. They keep their arms wrapped around it super tight. And I want new minds, new ideas, younger people, and an opportunity to expand and diversify, not just the people, not just the wineries you're working with, but we've recently reached or expanded into the spirits. So Italy has a huge history of spirits, and so we're delving into that. And the president that I hired 6-7 years ago is now my partner, and so we have a transition plan in place, and that's going to give us more stability and confidence and leadership, well into the next 15 years or so. A lot of people want a 5-year plan. We're giving our wineries, and we're giving our employees and our distributors within the United States a very, very long-term picture that makes us reliable. And at the same time, we're dealing with smart young folks. And so we're having, we have good, clever ideas. We give a lot of responsibility to our managers. We've got just under 20 people working for Dalla to cover the entire United States. And we're still hiring. We just hired, actually, we're interviewing to hire people for some new positions that would include like logistics and brand management, and all these pieces. as the organization grows, become integral. Without these pieces, without enough bottles to sell, you're out of business. With too many bottles to sell, your cash flow is killed. So there's a fine balancing act between those, and how you manage that. And a lot of, going back to what your next guest is going to talk about, leadership. There's a lot that relies on leadership in this type of business. People don't think about it, but you need to be able to work very, very closely with the families and the vineyards, and that's crucial. That's key. These are the families that we know, that we love, that we're friends with, that we support, that we're ambassadors for as we travel the United States. We work across the entire United States, and we're building brands. But we also have families on the other side of the Atlantic that are beholden to us, that we're responsible for. And we take that very, very seriously. It's not just, well, it didn't work out this year, let's try the vintage next year. So right. No, we need to find ways to be successful year after year, vintage after vintage. And that's why we work with a very select group of producers. And for the most part, we only have one producer per region. So one producer in Chianti Classico is an example. One Prosecco producer, one Lambrusco producer, one producer in Mount Etna. I mean, you can go to our website and see a map of all of our wineries, but it's about selection, and we have a highly curated portfolio. And we guarantee certain things to our wineries when they climb on board. And as a result, almost nobody leaves the portfolio. So stability is really important. It's important to us. It's important to our importers and our distributors. And it's important, obviously, to the wineries that we work with. And wine is tricky because it's a controlled substance. So alcohol is a controlled substance, and every state after Prohibition was able to write their own laws. And so the laws are very, very different from Utah to Texas to Florida to Pennsylvania to Massachusetts to California. They're very different laws, and they allow for very different things. And the importation and the distribution of wines in those states is very regulated. So both the sale of it to the public, the importation of it, the distribution of it, the way the taxes are collected. If you've got a restaurant, you have to pay for that case of wine that came in the door today. Is it due on receipt? Some cases it is. In other cases, you have terms. In some cases, we're only allowed to have one distributor per state. In other states, we can have multiple distributors by state. So there's a whole plethora of laws that you have to navigate. And it gets very tricky, and you have to know what you're doing state by state. Can you do an incentive? We want to promote this wine. Well, that's considered a gift, and you're not allowed to do that. But we just gave them tickets to the Beyonce concert. That was all. No, it doesn't work. And then there's fines, and there's your licenses are at risk, or whatever it happens to be. But it varies state by state. So it's a challenging industry. There are changes to the laws as we move forward. And remember back before there was Amazon, before there were ways to deliver things to your home. Well, at that point, you just go to the wine shop, you show your ID, and you buy a bottle of wine. But now you can order it through the internet. So what are the rules regarding that? Interstate commerce rules. How do I know you're 18 years old? All these kind of questions. And so that's been a development specifically for the wine question, for the reasons that I stated. If you're selling flashlights, maybe you've got other issues that I'm not aware of, but they're not these kind of issues, as well as temperature control and all that kind of stuff when you're dealing with direct to consumer sales. But it's a fascinating industry. It's a fascinating business. And usually people, they gravitate to one piece of the business. They're going to be a label designer. They're going to do social media. They're going to be the farmer and the viticulturist. All these things are broken down. You're going to do finance for a winery. which has, agriculture in general, the way that it's financed is a little bit different from other businesses because the return on your investment can be so long. You buy a piece of ground, you plant it, it's years before you have the first real vines growing. And then, so maybe it's 3 or 4 years, and then you pick that, and then maybe it's another 2, 3, 4 years until that wine has been in the tank or wherever it happens to be in a barrel, and then it gets bottled, and then it goes to the marketplace. It's a long, long time because we're dealing with an agricultural clock and not with, if you're making spirits, that's much quicker, isn't it? You put the raw materials in, you distill it, and you can make spirits or beer a lot faster. But the wine business is very particular. You mentioned something at the beginning, Kevin, and that was, well, it's actually the topic of the podcast itself. Is it money or is it wealth? What's the actual title? What do you?
So the name of the show is People Making Money, but I interpret that broadly. So it's both careers in business, but it's also then how do you invest the money? How do you build wealth if that's your goal? I mean, on some level, and you hit on one of the major themes of the show when you were talking about the families in Italy. Is it appears to me that your business is really built on relationships, that you're able to somehow establish connections with these families in Italy and then build them and keep them growing over the years. And that's a form, I would argue that's a form of wealth as well. So I think business and professional activities are really a driver of our overall lives. And if you can see this graphic here, this is called the 3 pillars of attainment, and it's based on 3 pillars: self, relationships, and pursuits. But the idea is, in the end, they all work together and they all support each other. So if you're going to have success in the pursuits pillar, it's probably because you have strong relationships and you really understand who you are and what it is that you want to accomplish. So they all work together. But in any event, it's really, to answer your question, a long answer to your question, it's really both aspects of that.
When I was looking at this industry, I never thought about wealth. I never thought about making money. And it's honestly never been my goal in building this company. So we're a national organization, and a lot of people have worked for Dalla in excess of a decade, and it's a very good, beautiful, stable culture, stable family for the most part. And that goes true both on our side, the Dalla Terra side, the winery side. That portfolio doesn't rotate very much at all. We hope it's stable, as well as our distribution network, aside from acquisitions and things that are happening independent of us in the US market. So when I think about making money, what I think, this is me personally,
yes,
it's never been my objective or my goal. What I've always been interested in is experiences. I was always interested in funding a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And I've done a pretty good job of funding a lifestyle. For people that are interested in the wine industry, it is a lifestyle. It's a beautiful lifestyle. It's a lifestyle of culture and people. No offense to the aluminum siding industry, but I've never been to one of their dinners. I don't know what they sit and chat about. But when you're dealing with winemakers and wine lovers, and they come from all walks of life, it's a wonderful unifying force. And so it's a great industry to work in. We have the same issues of funding and distribution and supply chain and all that kind of stuff, but we all love a common interest. And so for me, it's been more about funding a lifestyle and building a way of life. And I see that in the wineries. Many of the wineries that we work with are many, many generations old, 3, 4, 5+ generations, 6 generations. Wow. And we ourselves have, after 33 years, we've worked with, in some cases, the father that found it, and then he stepped back, then the son or daughter that took over, and now their children. So we've already worked in many cases with 3 generations of owners. and of family members.
Mm-hmm.
And why do they stay? Well,
Right.
they don't all stay. Some go off and they do other careers,
Mm-hmm.
but there's enough within the industry and the family and the way of life that people choose to stay in the business. Now, it's a hell of a lot easier to stay in the business if you inherit a wider division. Let's be perfectly honest. And it's a beautiful thing if you're born into that. But even folks that have been born into that have grown and built and developed these wineries with whom we work within their purview while they're running the show. That's extraordinary. And it's like, oh my God, they were given this. Yeah, but look what they built since.
Right.
Look at the quality, look at the image, look at the way that they've redesigned both the infrastructure and the exoskeleton, purchasing and growing new vineyards and creating new wines and developing new teams. So at any level, it takes a lot, but there's so much there in this particular industry. And I'd like to encourage anyone that's curious about it to take a look at it. It's not, they're quite honestly, I see personally, I don't want to go on a limb, but I see respect for alcoholic beverages as opposed to abuse within it because we're not in it for that. And I think growing up with it and my own daughter, as we're having wine with dinner, it's like, oh yeah, we have wine friends. Like, you get to drink wine. It's like, yeah, would you like a glass? We're not going to like sneak the bottle off, but we're going to enjoy a glass of wine because, like I said earlier, wine for me is food. Wine is another natural accompaniment to food, and everything within reason. Everything needs to be balanced, both the quantities that you're drinking as well as ideally the quality of what you're drinking. But I think that wine adds a lot when done properly, like anything else. Wine can be synergistic and can be a beautiful addition to the quotidian life, to our table, to our families, to our friends, and a way to share an experience and maybe even heighten it. The acids, the delicacy, the tannins, the structures of what we're tasting. If you stop for a moment to think about it, which is always the challenge and always the beauty. There's very little we do more as human beings than eat and drink. We do it every single day. So if we can stop for a moment and pay attention to that and focus on what it is and where it comes from and why is it that way? I remember that other vintage of this other thing and how that was different and how that responded and why was that? And once you start being curious, once you start asking questions, then I think the world becomes a much more interesting place. So those are just a few highlights.
Yeah. I mean, so again, you've hit on one of the sort of through lines of the show, and that is you've defined what success means to you, as opposed to taking some external definition of success and saying, well, this is what I have to meet. So whereas, accumulating huge amounts of wealth may be one person's definition of success. Yours was, as you put it, funding a lifestyle. And in many ways, it seems to me you've lived a very integrated life, one that is truly an expression of who you are. And I look at your life and I don't see much of a separation between your work, the things that you enjoy doing, who you are as a human being, the kind of things that you value. It seems to me you've put all that together in a very holistic way. I don't know what if was that by design? Is that who you are? How is my perception accurate, do you think? And if so, how do you think that came about? Because I think most of us strive for that, to live this sort of integrated life, right? As opposed to, I got my work over here, I got my family over here, and whatever else.
Yeah, I don't do well in compartmentalization. So for me, it's who I am and how I make sense of the world, essentially. And I just pulled up a quote I'm gonna read a quote. I don't usually read other people's stuff, but this is attributed to James Michener. I
Okay.
think it's attributed properly, but it's a classic quote, and it ties in exactly what you were just talking about, Kevin.
Mhm.
It says, "The master in the art of living makes little distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his information and his recreation, his love and his religion. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence at whatever he does, leaving others to decide whether he is working or playing. To him, he's always doing both."
Mm-hmm.
So I think I don't know that I achieve that on a daily basis, but overall, over the past 3 decades plus, it's been a balancing act.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime you're, especially as an entrepreneur, there's highs and lows, obviously, but it's the fact that you really, I'll just speak for myself. I really love what I do, and I love all the aspects of it. That's not true. I appreciate all the aspects. I don't love all the aspects.
Uh-huh.
And so some of those aspects, I'm doing less or none of them today.
Mm-hmm.
But I do respect them and the importance of all of them. And I think that that drive for excellence in an organization and support of other people's organizations, in many cases, we're just a support player. We are making some of our own wines, but 99% of what we do is focusing on the work of others. And I think that it's that drive for excellence day in and day out that keeps it fun. I mean, you can't do this stuff if you're not having fun. I don't think you have to have something that gives you joy in the process. And I do find joy in this process day in and day out.
Where did that desire to strive for excellence come from, do you think?
I don't know. I grew up, I have wonderful parents, and they kind of began to show me at a very young age the world, and the world, what the world is comprised of. And that included experiences in different cultures and different countries and different opportunities. And I think and in each one of those, there was excellence. There was an opportunity to grow and do more. And I think that it was a matter of, for me, like I said at the beginning, it was a matter of seeing what was possible. And I had to be able to integrate that and know that these things were possible, whatever it was. I'm not even business, just whatever somebody's passionate about. And that opportunity to see excellence in music, excellence in art, excellence in business, excellence in sports, excellence in whatever people are doing, excellence in writing. And just appreciating that quality and understanding the difference. I think volume only matters in ice cream. I love it, but other than that, it's quality. And so, okay, gelato is another story. That's quality, but I think that it's a matter of understanding and appreciating excellence across the board, and then striving for that in our own lives, whether on families, whether on relationships. But it all takes a lot of work. It all takes a lot of work. And ideally, we both love and work in our relationships. And the same is ideally true about careers. And you know what? People get divorced. And you know what? You don't have to do the same damn job you've done for the last 5-10 years. You can change gears. You can go back to school. You can leave school. It's okay to change lanes at the same time. And we grow as human beings and people. I've happened to have found an industry that is the one industry that I've done, for the most part, professionally for my career. And it's so diverse that I love it. And a lot of people stay within the industry. They'll start a winery, they'll sell it, they'll move, they'll do this, they'll do that. But it is a very interesting environment in which to work. And especially even now, even today, maybe more challenging than ever. Why? Because of obviously global warming and the environment, and things are changing. And if you're in agriculture and you're in a farming, I don't care what continent you're on, it's changing. And does it still make sense? And what are we doing, to combat that or recognize it? What are we doing in the vineyards, in the fields, in agriculture to deal with it? So all these things are growing and changing. And the challenges, they never stop. So if you're looking just to get it to that right point where you can finally take your hands off the wheel and just cruise on autopilot, it doesn't happen. Everything needs attention and work and maintenance and development. And if you love those kind of things, you'll be forever happy. There's plenty of that to go around.
Yeah.
But I do have a lot of respect for the world of agriculture and the world of wine growing in particular. It takes time and opportunity to develop that, both on the production side as well as on the appreciation side. And wine it's not for everybody, obviously, and not everybody can afford it. And but the quality of wine today, there really are no more bad wines. There's quality wine out there at all price points. And so I would encourage people to trust their palate and try something new, try something different. Don't drink the same thing that you had before, unless it was, you're at someone else's house and you took a picture of that label. You're like, I really like that. Good for you. Go ahead and try things, try different things, expand your palate, and think about what you're drinking, what you're eating, the pairing, turn your mind in a sense into a little bit of a database so you can start comparing different vintages, different varietals, different areas, so you can start to make sense of it for you, because nobody can tell you what you like, and don't be influenced by others. Trust your palate, trust what you like, and go with that, because that's the only thing that's gonna suit you for your lifetime. And there's so much good information and reading and maps and virtual tours to really be able to dive in a relatively short time, to learn an incredible amount about the wine industry and wine and food pairing. And restaurants usually offer a by the glass selection, so it's something that you can go ahead and try to focus on. And my wife used to challenge me by saying that I often buried the lead. And so one of the leads in us being relevant and in all this time is the business model that I developed way back when, and that back in the late 80s, and that's basically Winery Direct. And so all of our wines are imported directly into each market. And so basically what that means is we've taken one of the steps out of the importation and distribution model. So it doesn't go to a national importer and then it gets separated out and it goes out to other distributors and then it goes out to restaurants and retail. We eliminated the national importers. So our wines are sold directly to the distributors in each market. And so I think one of the things that keeps us relevant today is value. And we have a little bit of a better mousetrap. We have a different business model that's on our website, and it's a business model that's explained with numbers, and yet nobody has chosen, to my knowledge anyway, to recreate that. And I think it's a little bit too late to do it. You need a certain critical mass to make it work, and we work at relatively lower margins on purpose. We work as the sole U.S. agent for these wineries, and we work on a commission. And so for others to go ahead and do that as opposed to markup. Right. So we don't necessarily, in most of the import world, whether it's food or wine or whatever it is, any kind of product, the idea is to push down the cost to whoever you're buying it from, get a better deal. Mm-hmm. And then you want to lift up your price as high as you can. You're going to live on that, on the delta. You're going to live on that margin. Mm-hmm. And that would put us, and does put others, at odds with their suppliers. Mm-hmm. You're trying to make money at their expense. And with us, it doesn't work that way. With us, we're perfectly aligned with all the wineries because we work on a percentage. They make more money, we make more money. They sell more dollars, we sell more dollars. Mm. And so our suggestions, our models, our plans, our strategies, wine by wine, brand by brand, are trusted. They're always questioned, but the wineries understand that we're on the same page. They understand that we're pushing for the same objective. And if we say the wine can be a little bit more expensive because, look, you have very little of it, supply and demand, okay. But if we also say at the same time, don't raise your price, oh, you don't want us to make money. How can we be here if you don't? No, we want you to overall make more money. Overall, we want you to make a little bit less or keep the same pricing. But overall, we're going to sell a lot more bottles for you because we're going to hit a particular price point or a particular strategy. And so those points are very well taken because we're literally all in the same boat. And I think that's another, when you're talking about teamwork, I think that's a really important concept. So it's been developed over decades here at Dalla Terra, and yet it's very, very slim margins. We're very lean. We're very effective. We're a very efficient organization, and it's tough for others to work similarly, which is why I think we're probably the only one of the only organizations, if not the only one, that's working with this business model. So it's we continue to refine it, but it's a real joy. I mean, you can do good while doing well, and you can do well by doing good in this industry by supporting families across the board, growing and giving more diversity to the American consumer, and at the same time making enough profit to continue to grow and build the company, expand, hire new people, take on new wineries, take on new fields such as spirits. And above all, people can tell that we're not just moving widgets around. Right. We love what we do. We really love what we do. And it carries through. And I mean, come on, no one is more fun than the Italians. Questi italiani mi fanno ridere tutti I giorni. They make me laugh every day. They're so much fun.
Well, unfortunately, and I told you this was going to happen, we have to wrap things up because we've actually gone a little bit over our hour together. And there's I could spin out the questions I want to ask you, but I do want to take a couple of minutes just to kind of sum up, what I've learned from talking to you. So I think first of all is the idea that we need to really sort of cast our gaze as broadly as we can to really understand what is out there, what are the things that we can do, what's not on our radar, so to speak, that might really pique our interest and be something that we can be involved with and really enjoy doing, as opposed to just going to the office and sort of filling it in. So I think that's number one. Number two, and I one of my dearest and longest friends has this same philosophy that your wife gave you, which is, say yes, or he puts it, just say yes. And he's become a doctor at NASA as a result of that philosophy after, working at the Metropolitan Opera and scuba diving in Antarctica and all these amazing things that he's done. And a lot of it has come. And that is such, he said to me one time, he said, we live in this society where we've been told for decades, just say no. And while that may apply to certain things in life, it's much better to just say yes. Or another way to put it is, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Right?
True.
Right. And then, I think too, emphasizing finding where success is for each one of us. What does that mean for us, as opposed to following someone else's model of success? And in your case, that entailed, building relationships with these families in Italy, being involved in something that really didn't impose boundaries on how you lived your life, and crafting a profession and a way of supporting yourself that was very authentic to who you are. And that, I think that can be very scary, but in the end, it seems to me it's really the only true path to enjoyment, right? Because otherwise we're just not living, we're not being who we want to be. So I think, I pass those lessons along to our viewers, and gosh, like I said, I there's so many more questions I would ask you, but we'll have to make that for another time, or maybe we'll do a show flying or something. I love flying, so but all my friends who have small planes, they've all sort of dispersed to other planes, no pun intended, shall we say. So, and there's all those other aspects that we could have covered as well, how flying fits into this and all of that. So Brian, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show today. It was so terrific to just listen to what you've learned over your career, and to learn from someone who you clearly love what you're doing. You are living, being, Brian Larky, in a way that most of us, I think, would love to be able to live, who we are. And I think too, you were very honest that it wasn't always easy. There were certainly, roadblocks that you had to, deal with along the way. And that's life, right? I mean, I would venture to guess that those roadblocks actually added the spice, perhaps, to the sweetness and the tastefulness of the life that you enjoy now.
Yeah. No matter how much work you put into it, you can still make it worse. Yeah, no, there's a lot of ups and downs, and I think in addition to the points that you highlighted, that you brought out, it's tenacity. It's not giving up. It's sticking with it. It's getting, the old saying of, as long as you get up, one more time that you get knocked down, you're going to make it. And so it's a matter of sticking with it and finding something that you love enough that you can dedicate yourself to. Yeah. And it's at least in my case, I believe in that wholeheartedly.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps it up for today. Just a quick reminder again, next week, 10 a.m. Monday, Trusts and Estates Weekly. And Tuesday at 11 a.m., Business Lessons from the Military with my friend, retired Navy Captain Mark Brooker. And then next Wednesday, we'll be back here for People Making Money. And I'm trying to remember who my guest is for next week on that show, and it's slipping my mind. But if you check our social media or go to our Eventbrite page, you'll see all the upcoming shows, and would love to have you join us either live or certainly watching it streaming. If you have any questions about anything we talked about today, feel free to post them on social media. I will post Brian's website, so if you want to check out what he's doing, and like you said, his model for business, the way he's aligned himself with the people he works with in terms of aligning their interests, I think that's a great lesson to keep in mind as you're developing your business, because that way we can all grow together. So thank you very much for joining us, Brian. Thank you once again for being my guest. And that just leaves me with my sign off, and that is to remind my dear friend, who hopefully is watching down on us right now from heaven, Marie, darling, you are and ever will be my belle. Thanks a lot, folks. Enjoy the